Hello, I am the Scripted Doctor and welcome to the channel. We've made it to episode 3 of Star Trek Discovery, and while the first 2 episodes weren't great, and in fact repeated a lot of the same story beats and information, maybe we'll get some actual story progression for our Discovery crew. Well, in a world where Star Trek is done well, maybe, but sadly, the 3rd episode, People of Earth, is alarmingly thin. We open the episode with a personal log from Michael Burnham, programmed as an automatic transmission to the USS Discovery for when they arrive. She updates us with a brief summary of what happened to the galaxy and how she has spent her year adjusting to the future. Apparently, dilithium supplies dried up around the year 3000, and the Federation tried alternatives to warp drive designs, but none proved reliable. Really? None. 700 years of technological progress and not a single alternative could replace a dilithium warp core? Not an artificial singularity that the Romulans use? Not transwarp drive or the spatial trajector that the Borg have? Do the writers realize that dilithium isn't the fuel for warp drive? If anything, it's closer to a spark plug. I am oversimplifying, of course, but I have found that's a good comparison to start from when explaining a warp core. Dilithium is like a spark plug in an engine. It facilitates the reaction of matter and antimatter. When those two collide, it releases a massive amount of energy. The dilithium allows the reaction to be controlled so the ship doesn't explode. The chamber that houses the dilithium collects and distributes that release of energy to the engines, thus allowing for faster-than-light travel. That's just the basics of how it works. Without dilithium, there can't be a safe control of a matter and antimatter reaction, at least by 23rd and 24th century standards. But the problem isn't dilithium. The problem is needing to generate an equal or greater amount of energy to power warp engines. How are we supposed to believe that the Federation couldn't achieve this over 700 years? How could there be no advancements in technology over that course of time? Would they even really still travel by ships at that point? Wouldn't the Federation have planet-to-planet transporters? Heck, would starships and exploration really be a thing 700 to 1,000 years in the future? With a quick glance at Memory Alpha, we see that by 2364, humans had charted 11% of the galaxy, and the following year an additional 8% on top of that for a total of 19%. Even without exponential growth, only charting an additional 8% of the galaxy per year, the galaxy would have been fully explored within 100 years. That still gives the Federation 600 years of research, cultural exchange, and relationship building across hundreds of other planets and species. True, not all species are going to be warp-capable, and some may be far more advanced than the Federation, and that's the point. With all those centuries of variables, how can this situation be believable within their own universe? These writers want to say dilithium blew up. Fine, I'll humor them on the concept. But to ask me to believe that not a single other alternative could be found when we have in-universe alternatives is willfully ignorant and limiting the possibilities for fun storytelling and conflict. Warp drive alternatives were being experimented on throughout Star Trek. There was an entire episode of The Next Generation regarding the Soliton wave, a means to travel at warp without dilithium or an engine. This series already mentioned quantum slipstream in their season premiere. Are we to believe that no one besides Species 116 was able to perfect it? There is a huge factor missing from this situation being believable, and that is a counter to the Federation, something to properly convince us of the lack of alternative technologies. Some organization or species that has a dominating hold over the galaxy that obstructs other species and organizations from developing any means that could threaten the powers that be. Wow, I'm really getting off track. Let's move on for now.
But in an instant, all dilithium went inert.
Oh, for sake. First, dilithium is in short supply. Then it goes inert, and somehow it explodes. Or because it's inert, starships explode? And if all the dilithium is inert, how is it still valuable for warp drive? Do these writers even know the definition of inert? It means lacking the ability or strength to move, lacking vigor, or chemically inactive. I wouldn't be surprised if the upcoming edition of the Oxford Dictionary put a picture of Star Trek Discovery next to the definition, because this is indeed a show that meets all those factors. So here's a question we have to pose. If we learn in the show that dilithium is inert, and that's what led to the burn, then how are its fragments still usable for warp drive? If it is inert, it can't be used to control a matter-antimatter reaction. If the entire premise of this season is that dilithium is rare and valuable, why define it with a specific characteristic that is the opposite of that premise? It's because the writers are desperate to sound scientific without having the necessary cognitive ability to grasp basic science. So the writers ignore the contradiction of their inert dilithium, and they proceed with Burnham's log. We learn that she's become a courier, delivering goods in exchange for dilithium so she can try and find clues in the hopes of deducing what caused the burn. Her goal is to solve this problem so she can restore the Federation. But we're missing a very important question to address. Why must the Federation come back? What is the state of the galaxy that compels this need? Is the entire galaxy struggling or just a quadrant? Is there a new superpower that is enslaving other worlds? As an audience, we need a compelling reason for the Federation to be rebuilt, but we're not getting that. Burnham has been here for a year, and the information she's gathered seems minuscule. She informs us that she's changed over that time, learning to be someone different in this new world, but her log entry is interrupted when she receives a signal on her communicator. Wait a moment. She's hanging out with Book in this scene where she receives the signal, but she wasn't recording a log, yet the recording was interrupted? What is going on here? Logs are recorded to give an update on past events, but the way this is cut together, it appears to be happening at the same time. The recap completes with Burnham beaming over to the Discovery where she is greeted with hugs by much of the crew. For some reason, the crew of the Discovery reacts to Burnham as if they haven't seen her for a year, when from their perspective it's been less than a day. I can understand them being happy to see their friend, but their reaction seems a little too extreme given everything we know from the previous episodes. We are shown this reunion through slowed footage and crossfades as she embraces each member of the crew. Burnham's been doing fine on her own for the past year, and the Discovery has only been missing her for what I estimate is around 12 hours. This build-up and rejoice feels disingenuous because they are treating the situation as if both parties haven't seen each other for a year when that is not the case. It makes the crew look like a bunch of pet dogs happy to see their human return home. It's bad enough that we barely got any of their names over the last 2 seasons, and now the writers have to treat them like this? But what we get after this sappy, empty exchange is a really mind-boggling role reversal. Instead of Saru asking how Burnham has been over the past year, Burnham is asking about the crew as if they've experienced the same passage of time as she has. It doesn't make any sense. She's a scientist. She knows there's a time displacement between them. She has all the knowledge of this new galaxy. She should be answering questions to help acclimate her crew. We cut to Burnham finally doing a little bit of that on the bridge, sharing what she's learned over the past year. When Stamets remarks how all dilithium exploding at once is impossible, Giorgio reminds him that he uses mushrooms to travel through space. A little meta, but not wrong. Finally, we get some new information as Burnham reveals that she found a part of a transmission from an obsolete Starfleet channel. It's played over the speakers and we learn of a character named Admiral Senatal. He's asking those that still believe in the Federation that he is waiting for them on Earth. Earth had been too far away for Burnham to reach in this time, but now that the Discovery is here and they have the spore drive, they can make the journey instantly and find out what is left of the Federation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't a significant part of Season 2 addressing damage that the spore drive caused to that mushroom network? Weren't they planning to retire the ability as a result? Well, I suppose after 900 plus years of no one using the drive or being able to rediscover it, the damage to that dimension has been repaired and they are free to use it again. Burnham suggests exercising caution when approaching Earth and recommends claiming they were a ship stranded as a result of the burn and slowly journeying home. Giorgio compliments Burnham on her acclimation to this time period and that her caution and independence are welcome traits. Before they get underway, Saru wants to take Burnham aside to discuss the chain of command on Discovery, but she refuses and states that Saru should be the captain. After all, between the two of them, Saru is the only one that actually went to and graduated from Starfleet Academy. Burnham is a graduate of the Vulcan Science Academy and was accepted into a Starfleet crew by Captain Giorgio at the request of Sarek. All this time, she's never really been Starfleet. She's at best a Vulcan exchange student with an honorary rank. So Saru is rightfully the ranking officer to take command of Discovery. She gives a brief speech of Saru bringing the crew to the future and carrying the burden of command all this time, which by my estimate is now 18 hours maybe? She refers to Saru as captain in the truest sense of the word. Saru's response?
Damn right!
Well, it should be, but instead he takes the position with honor. He gives a speech about the ship and its mission to make the future they are in bright. I gather this is a direct message more so to the audience than the crew. This milking of moments in the episode so far appears like it wants to be bigger than it actually is. It doesn't feel genuine to me, but I won't ignore the effort. After the opening credits, that's right, now is when we get to the opening credits. All this exposition and emotions happened in the show's teaser. I shouldn't be surprised, really. After all, we just had 2 episodes that covered the same territory, so why not give us a teaser to remind us of that information? We return to Discovery, where drones and workbee pods are completing hull repairs. Tilly is in the corridor displaying Starfleet badges for some reason. Are these of the lost crewmen, ones that didn't survive the wormhole or crash? We don't know. If they are of dead crew, it's strange how we got that funeral for that robot girl no one knew last season, but this time around all we get are badges on a corridor wall as a memorial. Burnham finds Tilly and the 2 exchange hollow emotions in the corridor. Tilly talks about her family and not being able to share in their lives and experiences, how she regrets not having enough time to say goodbye and worries about how unfamiliar Earth might be when they return. Wow, she must have been really caught up in the moment last season if she is only now realizing all the things Burnham warned her and the rest of the crew about when it came to leaving their time. Tilly shifts the conversation to Burnham.
I always knew that I would see you again.
Woman, there hasn't been enough time passed for you to have any doubt of that. This entire scene only serves the purpose of reinforcing the idea that Burnham is not the same character we've seen over the last 2 seasons, and it is conveyed by having Tilly tell us this information instead of having Burnham's actions reflect that change, breaking the paramount rule of writing: show, don't tell. The scene doesn't feel organic or honest. We can tell this is to be true as it starts out with Tilly decorating the corridor alone, Burnham showing up to exchange exposition, and Stamets interrupting their talk via comms, wondering why Tilly hasn't returned to him with a recalibration kit.
Ensign Tilly, I'm still waiting for that recalibration kit.
Some things never change.
Some things never change? Not enough time has passed for there to be a change. It's been less than a day for you, Tilly. Only Burnham has had a year go by for her. But these writers keep treating the dynamic between Burnham and the crew as if both parties haven't seen each other for ages. I suspect this scene is part of a reshoot. It doesn't have a proper flow between the previous scene and the next, and its actions retrospectively do not match the context of the scene. What Tilly was doing at the start of the scene does not relate to the reason she is pulled away at the end. This information provided to us by Stamets conveys that Tilly was given a specific task to do, but Tilly has not done or even begun that task. Instead, she's dicking around in a corridor playing with Delta badges on the wall when Burnham arrives. Its only purpose is to inform the audience of Burnham being different, lighter, less cold, less Vulcan, and so forth. Possibly because there is no moment elsewhere in this episode that would convey that same information, and the writers really want to desperately tell those watching that Burnham's different and fun now. Before the Discovery can return to Earth, they'll have to hide their dilithium. Because they have a vast supply, Michael knows that this ship, primitive by current standards, will be an easy target. She convinces Saru to store the dilithium in Book's ship and keep it cloaked in their shuttle bay while they re-establish contact with Earth. Saru reveals that he intended Burnham to be his first officer, but she rejects the notion as she has not readjusted to the Discovery being a part of her life. Over this past year, she has had to live with less rules and less of a support system to learn all she could about this new galaxy. This ends up being a common point of interest with Burnham. We have 4 scenes with Burnham with 4 different characters posing the same questions to her regarding Discovery. Does Burnham still belong? Does she want to stay? Each scene doesn't give us any real answer to those questions. What we have here is repetition of a single point to eat up time to make up for this episode being thin. These scenes don't give us any new character development. They reinforce the exact same idea, that Burnham is struggling with adjusting to the ship and crew after being a year abroad with Book. All of this information was done effectively between her and Saru, and yet there are 2 scenes around that one hammering in the same point, followed by another one after they leave for Earth. Once the Discovery reaches orbit of Earth, they are greeted not by Starfleet or the Federation, but by Captain Doya of the United Earth Defense Force. She informs the Discovery that they are in violation of Charter and to leave immediately.
Leave immediately. You are not welcome here.
After watching the last 2 episodes and almost half of this one, I have to agree with the Captain. I don't want Discovery around either. Go back and do it again. This time, try making it Star Trek. Saru introduces himself and requests to contact the Starfleet Admiral that sent the message Burnham found. Saru's fabricated story of being descendants of the original crew, essentially a generation ship, appears to somewhat convince the captain, and she sends an inspection team aboard to make sure they're not raiders or pirates. This warrants Burnham to take Book to her quarters where they dress as officers to avoid suspicion and maintain Discovery's ruse. Burnham joins Saru and the other captain in the ready room where we get another exposition dump of what happened to Earth after the burn. Apparently, the planet needed to be rebuilt after the disaster, and since then, they have been self-sustainable. Earth has always been self-sustainable. It's a planet where life evolved. That cannot occur if it is not self-sufficient. Earth today is very self-sufficient and self-sustainable. We know this to be true at the time of this recording because Earth has no concrete knowledge or relationships with extraterrestrial species that they have trade with in order to survive. Within the Star Trek franchise, the only resource Earth didn't possess that was needed was dilithium. However, Earth was still able to achieve warp speed without it, as proof by their first contact with the Vulcans. Here we have a situation where the dilithium blew up, and it's very rare, and Earth has decided to isolate themselves from the rest of the galaxy as a result. However, Captain Shortstack here, a term I'm using to describe the character, not the actor, adds on that they are constantly fighting off dilithium raiders, one specifically named Wen. I don't understand why raiders would be going after Earth for dilithium. It's not a resource found on that planet. Even if they are hoarding whatever was on the planet that survived the burn, what are they using it for since they're not sending ships out to explore space? I need more information regarding this self-sustainable Earth Captain Shortstack is referring. Instead, we learn that Starfleet Command is no longer on Earth, and by proxy neither is anything that resembles the Federation. Apparently, they fled 100 years ago because Earth would be a target. I don't understand that line of thinking. Why would any remnants of the Federation be a target? And a target by whom? More raiders? We learn that Earth left the Federation because they didn't need them anymore, and that the admiral they are looking for died 2 years ago on an outbound ship leaving Earth. Ships leave Earth now? They have a planetary force field. They have this security team watching over them to prevent people from visiting. Where is the logic allowing a ship to leave the planet, knowing that other ships it may encounter on that voyage may draw unwanted attention to Earth?
It just raises too many questions.
We get a brief moment with Stamets and his team reacting to the inspectors, where the youngest one comments on the antiquity of the ship and the functions of some of its technology. Before this interaction develops, they're interrupted with a red alert as Wen's ship approaches the Discovery. They open a channel where Wen demands Discovery's dilithium. Burnham denies they have any, but Wen is too smart to fall for such a lie, as he reveals that the ship's sudden appearance in the system says otherwise. He threatens to take what they want by force if the Discovery fails to comply with his demands. Captain Shortstack uses this conflict to deny Discovery from visiting Earth and demands they leave so her team can take care of Wen. She tries to leave the ship, but there is some form of interference preventing their transporters. She accuses Saru of sabotage, but he denies such actions on the fact that they are Starfleet. Might want to throw in how they're also not technologically advanced enough to stop their transporters, as they initially beamed through their shields to get on board in the first place. Saru takes charge, dictating that they will source the interference and deal with Wen themselves as the threats were directed to Discovery. Now, this is a cool conflict. The Discovery has found themselves outnumbered by raiders with incredibly advanced weaponry and are not a match for them, yet they choose to stay and address the issue. But it doesn't stay cool too long because Shortstack orders Saru to take this conflict away from Earth, or they'll have to shoot Wen out of the sky, thus having Saru cause a war in the name of Starfleet. What the hell is she talking about? Through her own admission, she threatened to blow Wen out of the sky and he hasn't provoked them. She would be the one starting a war, not Saru. This is a contrived stake. Wen is a raider leading other raiders. Are they part of an intergalactic alliance of raiders? I highly doubt it. Raiders don't usually have a whole lot going for them, which is why they have to raid. So even if there was a conflict, it wouldn't be a war, but rather a slaughter. It's not only an unnecessary escalation of stakes, it's also nonsensical. The threat has been established. An outdated ship is surrounded by multiple ships far more advanced than they are. That already works for now. Adding on the possibility of the war is superfluous. Obviously, Burnham has a plan to prevent a battle and save the day. She finds Book in the mess hall and reminds him of an old scheme they pulled. He doesn't like it, but agrees once he's had another drink. Burnham reveals that he's drinking synthahol and he isn't going to get that buzz he's hoping for. Well, that's interesting. Synthahol didn't exist in the 23rd century. How did the Discovery get their hands on it? Did it just magically appear with their time travel to the future? We learn of the existence of synthahol and when it was introduced from Data in the episode Relics.
Captain Scott is unaware of the existence of synthahol.
Synthahol?
It is an alcohol substitute now being served aboard starships. It simulates the appearance, taste, and smell of alcohol, but the intoxicating effects can be easily dismissed.
Here I am trying to get a buzz on and reach a place of existential despair.
Well, Book, if you want to experience existential despair, I suggest watching an episode of Star Trek Discovery. As Burnham leads, Book asks if she should be getting permission first.
Well, you have to ask for permission.
I'll apologize after.
But I thought Burnham had changed. We got all those scenes saying she changed, but here she is, back in uniform, behaving in the same way that got her in trouble in the freaking pilot, just doing something and willing to apologize later. Well, now it seems like all those moments of Tilly and Georgiou and Saru and Burnham herself telling us that she's changed just feels like a lie right now. This was a perfect opportunity to show us that Burnham had changed, but instead she does what we've seen her do many times before. Act on her own without informing the crew and hoping it will bring success that she can apologize for later. In the Spore room, Tilly and Stamets find the foreign tech that is keeping the inspection team from beaming out. They learn that any attempt to disable it will lower the Discovery's shields and make them vulnerable to attack from the Raiders. Stamets and Tilly exchange what they observed with the kid and deduce that there is far more going on with this teenager than they initially thought, and speculate more than the inspection team she works for knows.
How do you get a teen genius to fess up? Give her some of your weird mushrooms.
Who are you?
Wow, they are really trying for that levity here. Back on the bridge, Wen is refusing the Discovery's hails and Owusuken reveals that Burnham and Book are leaving the shuttle bay with all of their dilithium. Captain Shortstack is not too pleased by this, treating the revelation as if dilithium is contraband. Saru wants answers and orders to contact Burnham, but Georgiou interrupts and claims that if Discovery hails Book's ship, the Raiders will pick that up and assume that they're working together. Burnham will lose the advantage to whatever plan she's hatching, and they'd be back to square one. Captain Shortstack orders her ships to open fire on Wen, claiming that he can't get Discovery's dilithium. But why? We don't know what Wen plans to do with it. Given that he's defined as a raider, he's probably going to use it for things that he needs. Clearly, he's not more powerful than the Defense Force, as they have been thwarting his raiding attempts prior to this encounter. We need something more from Captain Shortstack here to get us on her side for denying Wen dilithium. Does he have some sort of devastating weapon that could destroy Earth, and its final component is dilithium, and that's why he's so aggressive with his raids? Burnham and Book discuss their next strategy as they approach Wen's ship, exchanging a few inside stories and references trying to convey a long and fruitful partnership of scheming throughout the galaxy. They start their deal with Wen, and Book learns that Earth is targeting their ship. Book wants to move, but Burnham is betting that Discovery will save them because Saru is Starfleet. Captain Shortstack orders the attack on Book's ship, and Saru protests and orders the Discovery to move into a position to block Earth's line of sight. Detmer is concerned with the order, as Discovery is newly repaired, and they don't truly know the severity of Earth's weapons or the effect they'll have on the ship. Of course, the rest of the bridge crew doesn't want to consider such options. They're throwing their chips in that Burnham has yet to steer them wrong so far, and that this plan of hers will work. Apparently, it wasn't just the actors that read the script, but the fictional characters they're portraying as well. Discovery takes 2 hits which knock out their shields. This act convinces Wen to agree to Burnham's deal, and she and Book manage to take Wen hostage and bring him aboard Discovery while also returning the dilithium. The Raiders stand down, refusing to engage until the safe return of their leader. We cut to the ready room where Wen and Captain Shortstack are being compelled to talk by the Discovery crew. They refuse to budge on their issues until Georgiou rips off Wen's helmet to reveal that he's human. Because of this, Captain Shortstack's perception of Wen has changed. So, what does this mean in retrospect? That because they thought Wen was an alien, it was okay to not hear them out and threaten war? But because Wen is revealed to be human, now they're willing to listen? This may not be the intention, but it is a clear result of the actions we've seen so far in this episode. Before that can be explored, Stamets has located the teenager and in some type of Hallmark family movie of the week tone, reveals the truth about Discovery to the kid in exchange for what she's doing here and not reporting her for sabotage. It has sweet background music, a cheerful yet patronizing tone from Stamets, and the immature awkwardness of a child. It's so cheesy that all it's missing is a cameo from Mary Lou Retton. The reason why this kid sabotaged Discovery is because she wanted to make sure she could trust them so she could join the crew. It turns out she knows the Admiral Discovery is looking for. Back in the ready room, Wen reveals that he's from the research colony on Titan that separated from Earth a century earlier. But after a disaster, they tried to get help from their home planet but were fired upon. Since then, Titan and Earth have been in conflict. Of course, because Earth has become a shoot first, ask questions later planet, they never knew they were fighting their own species. It's also rather strange that they gave Discovery far more latitude when they arrived than they did to Wen's people all those years ago. Now, with this revelation, Wen and Captain Shortstack are willing to discuss terms to reconcile their conflict. Adira, that's the teenager, is given permission to remain aboard the Discovery, and Saru learns and shares with Burnham that Adira is carrying the Trill symbiont of the Admiral they're looking for. With her help, they plan to find what is left of Starfleet. Burnham apologizes to Saru for not informing her of her plan, and Saru reminds her that there needs to be trust between them. Her response to Saru is to appoint herself as the first officer. For some reason, Saru accepts. But rewarding poor behavior even when the result ends up being beneficial is not the Starfleet way. Burnham claims to not be the same person she was in the previous seasons, but based on what I've seen in this episode, that's a lie. She has not changed one bit. She's still authoritative, still overly confident, and beloved by the crew for reasons I cannot find in previous seasons. She doesn't face any consequences for her actions of insubordination, and is instead rewarded as a result. It was only ever in the two-part pilot where she was punished for mutiny, but that punishment didn't last very long. It's baffling to see because being overly confident and authoritative are flaws a writer can have fun with. But those flaws in this show are used as skills, and that prevents her character from growing and overcoming those flaws. She ends up being a character in arrested development, and when a character doesn't develop, we tend to not like them. But the status of the show has to return to form, and she has to be back in position as the first officer. The episode concludes with Tilly and her fellow crewmates hugging and hanging out by a giant tree on Earth. So, when it is all said and done, not a lot has happened in this episode. Actually, not a lot has happened across the last 3 episodes. The only new things we've learned since the second episode, well, technically the first, as the second episode tells the same story as the first, is that Earth is no longer a part of the Federation, is an isolationist planet, and there's a 16-year-old girl with a Trill symbiont that might be able to help them find the last remnants of the Federation. That's very little progression over the course of an hour. The story of the Raiders and Earth is quite terribly handled. The episode pushes off the conflict between them to the final 20 minutes and wraps it up rather hastily. It's a very odd narrative flow. I would recommend that the better course of action would be to have the instant Discovery enters the solar system, they're ambushed by those Raiders. While they're trying to survive that encounter, ships from Earth show up to support the Discovery, or so we think, but instead wants to destroy the Raiders and confiscate the Discovery for their own purposes. This makes the episode's conflict between the Raiders and Earth over who gets the Discovery. With Discovery caught in the middle, they then use what they can learn of the two sides to their advantage and perhaps discover that it's humans fighting among humans. Have the conflict escalate with both sides opening fire on Discovery, but they use the spore drive to evade their weapons, which disables the shields on the opposing ships, and the Discovery crew can kidnap their leaders to broker a truce. That's just me spitballing an idea that has a bit better pacing, more mystery and conflict, and gives us a bit of an action set piece as well. With the two leaders of the opposing factions held hostage on Discovery, they find a way to mediate a truce and learn about the state of the galaxy. You don't need to waste time with a sappy, disingenuous reunion. You don't need that silly subplot of a ship inspection and sabotage. You just have to get to the main plot of finding Earth, and having Saru use Federation diplomacy to solve a problem and getting a reward of information to take them on their next mission. Just cut it all away and get to the point. Audiences can be smarter than a show like Star Trek Discovery gives them credit for. You don't need to dumb things down and repeat information. You just need to convey it in a simple and entertaining fashion to better your odds that they will understand and retain the information for the duration of the show. Keeping plot points simple allows the use of that extra time for real character development, especially in the stressful setting of being caught between two enemies. Have Burnham and Saru butt heads over a strategy. She has more experience in this galaxy than Saru, but Saru is still living in a world closer to Starfleet. Burnham wants to flee and avoid the conflict, but Saru wants to know the state of Earth and the Federation. You can tempt the idea of Burnham considering mutiny again, but chooses not to because the last time she did that caused a war with the Klingons, so this gives her an opportunity to support Saru and help find an alternative or a compromise. That can lead to the kidnapping suggestion. Unethical, but a means to stop the skirmish and save Discovery from being caught in the crossfire. By the end of the episode, Burnham learns to look before she leaps, and Saru learns that at times flexibility of the rules is acceptable. I think my approach here was an easy story to grasp, and I was able to do it by following a very important rule. The KISS rule. It is one in writing that is incredibly valuable and a rule I strongly encourage Seeker Hideout, if they're watching, to follow. Keep it simple, stupid. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.